Alright, so what I want you to be looking at today is we're going to be taking a little bit, continuing with the axial skeleton. And just to remind everybody, the axial skeleton is pretty much everything that's making up the axis of the body. So if we're looking at that, that would be the skull and the associated bones with that. It'd be your spinal cord, as you can see, which is lit up green on this one currently. And then it's also going to be the coccyx and the sacrum, which again is also green in this. And then it's going to be your sternum and your ribs. Everything else, part of the pelvic girdle or part of the shoulder girdles there, are considered to be part of the appendicular skeleton. If you think appendage is like an arm or a leg, that is going to be the appendicular skeleton. So today I really want to look at the spine. So we're going to isolate the spine now, I think. So we can isolate the spine here. And you can see the spine, if you're looking at everything here, there is a number of different vertebrae. How it really works is we have 7 cervical vertebrae. We're going to have 12 thoracic vertebrae, and then 5 lumbar vertebrae. Outside of that, you're going to have the sacrum, as you can see here, as well as the coccyx, which is this bone at the very bottom. So on the skeleton, this is pretty easy to figure out. If I unisolate this a second and we go back to the skeleton, if you were to look at this, you can kind of see that there are, if we zoom in on it, you have the 2 at the top here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that are not attached to a rib. Those first 7, so, and if I actually do the pen, I can do it here. There is 1, there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right there. Those are your cervical vertebrae. How you know that is they are not attached to a rib and they're closer to the head in the neck region, which is the cervical region. If we then go down a little bit more, the next 12 you can see are all attached to ribs. So if we're looking at these ones, there's T1, T2, T3, T4, T5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So all the thoracic vertebrae are attached to ribs. Really easy to remember that. Then after that, it's just you go a bit further down. So we get the lumbar vertebrae right here. And you can see there's 5 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is really what you're looking at when it comes to the different vertebrae on an actual skeleton. Like I said, that is when they are all together. Or articulated skeleton. If it's a disarticulated skeleton, I am also going to want you to be able to tell these apart. But that's a little bit different thing to go with here. So I can kind of show you a couple different things now. So first off, we're going to just go and touch on this one and isolate that one. So this is the C1. These are a little bit specialized. On this one, you can kind of see. So this would be a cervical vertebrae. There's a few things we can always see on cervical vertebrae. This one you can see articular processes here and here. But the other thing I'd like to point out is see this little hole right here? That is called the transverse foramina. You will see these on all cervical vertebrae, and you will see them only on cervical vertebrae. So that is one of the ways when you're looking at a disarticulated skeleton, and I'll show you on a lower one here in just a minute, you always see these transverse foramina. In this one here, you can see this large structure coming out right here. That is the transverse process. What you don't see on this one is you don't see a spinous process much at all on these ones. So this one, again, like I said, kind of a specialized one. It has a little notch right here, and that is actually an articulation with C2, or the axis that we'll see. So, but that is the articulation. So what you're going to be wanting to look at on these ones is, if we get rid of the isolation on this, we can actually now drop down to the next one, and we'll isolate that. And the main thing you can see on this one looks very similar to the other one. It does have a little bit more of a spinous process here. The other thing we can kind of see is if we rotate this a little bit, you can see this large pin going right here. That is called the dens, or the dens process. That is the articulation that is going to go with C1, and that allows us to do that head rotation movement. Again, outside of that, in the spinous process, you can see the transverse foramina, and again, you'll see that on all those. The center part here is the vertebral cavity. That is where the spinal cord is going to be traveling through. And really, outside of that, again, transverse process, spinous process right there. So now, again, what I'll do is I'll go down to the last one here. I don't need to show you each one of these, but you can see these ones kind of, in a lot of these cervical vertebrae, will also have a kind of a forked spinous process. That's another way to tell them apart. But again, if we go even down to the last one here, getting down to C6 or C7 even, you can see even on C7, if we isolate it, see how it has the transverse foramina kind of here and here. So all those, again, on those disarticulated ones, if you have to tell them apart, the way to tell it apart as a cervical vertebrae is those transverse foramina. So now if we go to the spinal, go all the way back to the spinal cord, we can kind of see a bunch of these the thoracic vertebrae. I'm just going to pick one out and take a look at it. What you'll notice on these ones, they have the superior articular surfaces and the inferior articular surfaces. So inferior is going to be these spots right there. Superior is going to be these spots right here. The other thing you see on these ones, a little bit more prominent, transverse foramina, transverse processes there, and the spinous process is on the back. One of the ways to kind of look at these, a couple different things to say about them. One is if we kind of take this and rotate it. Excuse me, sorry, I didn't mean to hit that button. If we take this and rotate it, you can see that spinous process right here, it aims down. The other thing is if you look at it like this, if I was to draw a couple of eyes on it here and here, it kind of looks like a giraffe head. So the thoracic vertebrae tend to look like giraffe heads. Where you'll see the lumbar vertebrae, they look a little bit different. So that is a thoracic vertebrae. Again, you should be able to tell apart on the skeleton because they're always connected to a rib, where you can actually even see that on any of these. You can see on any of these it's attached to the rib. But then if we isolate it, you can also see there is that process right here on the transverse process that is actually articulating with the rib. So now if we come down to the lumbar vertebrae, you can see here are the lumbar vertebrae. If we go and isolate one of these, one of the things you'll see, vertebral body is very large compared to the rest of these. They tend to have a more plate-like spinous process, as you can see right there on this one. You can see, oops, thought I got the pen. You can see right there, much bigger kind of plate-like surface on that one. Like I said, the vertebral body over here is much larger. Outside of that, if you look at them like this, these tend to look more moose-like. So if you're looking at these ones, they tend to look like a moose head. So you can kind of see it right there. You can see how this one looks a little bit more like a moose head. So thoracic vertebrae, more like giraffe heads. Lumbar vertebrae, more like moose heads. So then if we kind of finish our way down this spinous process, down the spinal cord, you can see we get down to the sacrum. So that would be the sacrum right here. So what we'll do now is we'll isolate this one out. You can see the articulating surface with the hips right here. So that would be kind of that surface that's going to be going with the rest of the girdle there. If we look on the inside of this, these little structures, these little lines that are kind of going right here and then another one right there, those are those transverse lines. If we kind of lift this up, you can see that opening right here. That would be the sacral canal. And then finally, if you look along the back here, you have this ridge kind of running right down the center here. That is that median sacral crest. So that is the different parts of the sacrum you really need to know. Again, if we kind of now bring it back here, coccyx, this is the bone right there. It is a bunch of fused vertebrae. Same thing with the sacrum. Again, this one a lot of times referred to as the tailbone. I just need you to know what it is. So outside of that, what we need to do is we need to go back and look at the skeleton again. So we're going to take this back out now to finish this off. And what we can't see on this one, because it is just the bones, you can't see the cartilage on these ones. But ribs, I just need you to know what would be the vertebral end and the sternal end. So obviously on any particular rib, this is going to be the sternal ends closer to the sternum, where the vertebral end is going to be back here. And generally on these ones, if you're looking at a disarticulated one, it's really easy to tell because that straight surface there on the front is because there's no cartilage. So normally under most conditions, you're going to have cartilage, and this would be hyaline cartilage connecting these back, something like this. And then these last three would do something. Oh, I kind of screwed that up. So they'd be going across. What you have going on here is you have really three types of ribs. So normally on these, the first 7 ribs, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 would have direct cartilage connections to the sternum. These are called true ribs. 8, 9, and 10 tend to go like that with cartilage. Those are called the false ribs. And then you can see the last 2 down here and down here. Those are the floating ribs, and you can see those on both sides. So that is the different rib types. And then really the last thing to talk about here is going to be the sternum, which I can't isolate the entire sternum, but you can kind of see a few different things on this one. So if we zoom in on the sternum, I'm going to move that out of the way a second. The sternum is really considered to be this whole structure of this part, and this part. Oh, excuse me, this part and this part. So the upper part of the sternum is called the manubrium. Then you have the main structure of the sternum, which is the body of the sternum. And then you have the very tip of it, which is called the xiphoid process. Outside of that, you have this jugular notch up here at the very top of it, right there. If I isolate this. Oh, there we go. You can see the jugular notch is right there. But then you can see the rest of this sternum and the different parts of it right here. Again, manubrium, body, and xiphoid process. So really what that does for us, that is really the rest of the rest of this axial skeleton. What I will do on a couple other ones here is I will give you the upper and lower limbs, and then we will be done with these different videos. So this really, again, gives you everything that was on that bone list. And again, this is stuff I would expect you to be responsible for when it comes to the next lecture or test where we're online here. We will also do a quiz in there that is all on these bones. So this is something you need to be paying attention to and making sure you get done.